Is morality a product of the culture we are born in and the values that we inherit? Or is there a standard, a code of conduct, so to say, that allows us to decipher right and wrong, good and bad across cultures and religions? Does the concept of right and wrong evolve with time and place, or does it remain the same? Is there a true definition of justice applicable across time, place, country, and individuals? Do ethics and morals change across generations, or do they remain the same? Can we ever achieve true knowledge? And do human beings share similar standards of humanity? Living in ancient Greece over 2000 years ago, Plato sought to answer these questions. In his quest for true knowledge, facing the skepticism of his critics who insisted that all standards of justice and morality are merely relative to time, place, social group, and the individual, Plato sought to argue, with the aid of his theory of forms, that concepts such as justice, morality, and courage were unchanging, that there was a common standard in regards to these values, applicable to all beings, and that true knowledge of these concepts was attainable by suitable training. So, what is relativism? What is the theory of forms? Do the forms present a valid argument against relativism of all kinds? And how do they help us establish a just society and differentiate between right and wrong, virtue and vice? Relativism is the idea that nothing is universally true or false, right or wrong, and that every truth, every concept of morality and ethics makes sense only within certain limits, in certain situations, and within certain circumstances. To some, that may sound modern and progressive. From the perspective of being broad-minded and less judgmental, one could argue that there is some merit to such an approach. It is most certainly true that traditions and societal norms vary with culture, country, and religious beliefs. Various practices considered reasonably normal in one society might be a sin and a punishable act in another. But, on the same note, it will also not be fair to allow relativism to be used as an excuse for actions that are clearly immoral, or for spreading beliefs that are clearly incorrect. So, it would probably be fair to say that the idea of relativism is itself relative. While there is no rule that guides us on when to be relativists and when not to be, there needs to be a line that stops this modern and broad-minded approach from becoming a free pass for acts and ideas that are immoral and, in some cases, pure evil. Now, although Plato seemingly focuses more on the flaws of relativism than its merits, thus disregarding relativism entirely, the theory of forms proposed by Plato does fulfill our need of a barrier that filters ideas and situations worthy of relativism from those that are not. In a sense, Plato's theory of forms states that all kinds of existences, physical or abstract, human or non-human, have their essence, or as Plato called it, their form, which defines and sets the standard for its nature. These forms are infinite, perfect, and unchanging. According to Plato's theory of forms, everything we experience in our physical world is a reflection or shadow of its form. These copies or shadows, called particulars, are finite, imperfect, and constantly changing. To understand this theory, consider the following scenario. Two people, A and B, visit a museum of Greek sculptures. Pointing towards a sculpture, A says to B, "That is Plato." At that moment, Plato, the person, walks into the room, and A declares loudly, "Look, it's Plato." Confused, B asks A, "Didn't you just say that sculpture was Plato?" In this scenario, Plato, the sculpture, serves as a particular, whose essence or form lies in Plato, the person. So understandably, Plato, the person, serves as the form of Plato. Meanwhile, every sculpture created to represent Plato will be an imperfect reflection of the form of Plato. Now that we understand the theory of forms, let's attempt to decipher what Plato discovers the form of virtue, the form of justice, to be. So, for Plato, what is justice? Is the form of justice or virtue knowable with absolute certainty, as is the form of Plato or the form of triangle? Plato says that any kind of being has virtue and is just as long as it functions according to its nature, according to the standard set by its form. Thus, to know what is virtuous or just or right for man, we must find out the form, the idea or essence of man. Plato proceeds to tell us that the form of man is constituted of three elements: the power to reason, the bodily desires or needs, and a spirited element that drives emotions such as anger, ambition, loyalty, and courage. The three elements of the form of man fall into a natural hierarchy, in which the rational element is the highest in power. The bodily appetites are at the bottom level of the hierarchy, and the spirited element occupies the intermediate level. This hierarchy is what's known as Plato's Tripartite Theory of the Soul. It implies that justice or virtue for a man would consist of functioning according to this hierarchical structure. But there is more. While Socrates suggested that virtue is knowledge, that if we truly know what's good, we will act in accordance with it, what Plato sees instead is that although we may know what's good, we would inevitably run into conflict with our bodily desires. Plato thought of the self or the soul not merely as a hierarchical structure, but as an organism. In a healthy living organism, the parts are in harmonious interdependence, each having a function that serves the whole organism. The dysfunctions or malfunctions of any part of the organism would have adverse effects upon the rest. For Plato, this means that neither a life devoted exclusively to bodily pleasures, nor a life ascetically dedicated to denying physical pleasures would be functional. So Plato tells us that morality, virtue, and justice consist of knowing and maintaining the harmony and balance between the soul's rational and irrational elements. This balance or harmony in the soul is the justice, morality, and virtue of the soul, and its product is happiness. Plato and the Greeks believed that the good life is possible only in the good state. Extrapolating the concept of the virtuous man to society as a whole, Plato tells us that the elements that make up a city correspond to the elements that constitute the individual human soul. Refuting the relativist idea of every country, society, and culture being uniquely different, Plato proposes that, similar to the tripartite individual human soul, every state of whatever type necessarily has three parts, which are its three social classes: a producer class, a military class, and a governing or ruling class. And in Plato's Republic, each of these three classes perform a vital function on behalf of the society, and true justice can be achieved only when these three classes selflessly perform their proper functions. Needless to say, this analogy leads us to Plato's ideal state, his republic. Plato's point is that governing a society is a skill that requires specialized and intensive training, and so a just society can be maintained when only the ruling class, who understand the forms through special training and knowledge, get to rule. And the military and producer class perform their designated functions, providing the state with the protection and the necessary goods and services it needs. Thank you for watching. To help us make more videos like this, consider supporting the Life Academy. For more thought-provoking content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And to learn more about Plato's ideal republic or his allegory of the cave, check out these videos.